Hello. So this video was originally going to be part of a much longer, more in-depth video on the She-Hulk series, but the project just kind of kept getting bigger and eventually it just completely got away from me. But I thought this segment kind of worked on its own, so here it is. Hope you enjoy. Order! Lawyer stuff. Let's talk about it. Put mic on the hammer. In a very original bit of putting the mic on a thing that it's not used for. I'm very funny and original. Let's talk about the lawyer stuff. So for some reason in this show, She-Hulk's clients are almost entirely just like very shitty people, which makes it hard to want to root for She-Hulk, let alone any of her clients, none of which are really worthy of any sympathy. Gonna bring up Daredevil again. One of the things that makes Nelson and Murdock really like relatable and sympathetic lawyers is that all of their clients are underdogs. Like Mrs. Cardenas, this kindly old lady who just wants to live in her apartment, but landlords are evil. You really want to root for the gang, and it's really sad when she explodes. Spoilers. Daredevil also does the reverse of this, where they have a client who is absolutely guilty. There's this dude who killed a guy with a bowling ball, and they reluctantly take on this case because, one, they need money, and two, Matt wants to learn more about the mysterious guy who hired them, the TikTok man. Plus, then you get this really interesting and iconic speech about the gray areas of morality and the limits of the law, how that ties into the themes of the show.
Sometimes the difference between right and wrong is a sharp line, and sometimes it's a blur. Everything's a blur for me because I'm blind. Justice is also blind, and that's what we're here to talk about today. Justice and the law and blindness. These are all the same thing. Now, some people say that my client is a murderer, but I ask you this. Did anyone see him do it? I know I didn't. I know I didn't. And if I'm blind, then I am justice. I rest my case, Your Honor.
Plus, if you go into season 2, you have all this interesting stuff with the Punisher, who is like definitely a dick, but also like maybe potentially sympathetic. So again, you bring in all these interesting moral quandaries. So we've seen that it can be very effective to have either a relatable underdog client that's like fighting against the machine, or like a morally questionable client who is maybe in the wrong, but maybe there's more to it than that, and what even is the difference between right and wrong. And both of these types of stories can be really, really interesting. She-Hulk does neither of these. All of She-Hulk's clients are these entitled white one percenters that both Jen and the show seems to just completely loathe and have this like absolute disdain for. And all the cases are just these like extremely petty bullshit. Jen has to file a lawsuit against Titania for using the name She-Hulk without her permission, but Jen doesn't even like the name She-Hulk, so we get the storyline that like no one wants to be involved in what's happening, and what's happening is like so fucking petty and like benefits nobody.
We move to dismiss this entirely frivolous suit.
Like her winning the case or not doesn't really benefit anyone other than Jen, kind of. In the episode with, I'm gonna call him My Immortal. It's Mr. Immortal. The episode with Mr. Immortal, Nikki and Mallory end up basically working against him because he's like so clearly in the wrong, and it's like he's their client, and they end up like helping out the people suing him. It's very weird. Some of this stuff is like kind of funny, I guess, but like why are all the stories like this? I thought the show might have been doing this on purpose and like building to something, especially in the Daredevil episode. Once again, the best episode. Matt actually kind of draws attention to this. He calls Jen out for being involved in this like very scummy law firm, but he's also kind of sympathetic. He points out that sometimes you need to take on cases that you might not like in order to pay the bills.
Well, the expression, one for them, one for us.
But this doesn't really end up leading to anything. At the end of the show, Jen is still involved in like a completely petty bullshit case that only benefits her specifically and no one else, suing Todd for, like defaming her or whatever. Like, obviously Todd is bad and deserves to be held accountable, but She-Hulk never takes on a case in the show that benefits anyone other than herself or society as a whole. She only ends up helping out some like rich white people that probably didn't really need help to begin with. I kind of wanted to do like a rundown of a bunch of other like lawyer shows and movies and stuff that like do lawyer things and courtroom drama sequences like better than She-Hulk, but like it's not really worth getting into, because if you ask the question which lawyer movies and shows did courtroom legal drama stuff better than She-Hulk, the answer is just all of them. Just all of them. Just every single movie ever that ever had a scene in a courtroom or a character that was a lawyer does something more interesting than what She-Hulk does with its lawyer stuff.
We will now take a brief recess.
Like, I was considering talking about Erin Brockovich or Legally Blonde, both excellent female-led lawyer stuff, one that's a drama, one that's a comedy. Both of them have more interesting legal scenes than She-Hulk. I just watched Primal Fear recently. What a fucking great movie. Like, if you want a good legal drama with a Hulk in it, watch Primal Fear. There you go. But it's like not really worth getting into like, oh, here are other legal dramas and legal stories that do similar ideas but more interesting, because like She-Hulk the show just like clearly has no interest in talking and doing that stuff, despite having attorney at law in the title of the show. Like, I didn't even bother watching the Legal Eagle episode on She-Hulk. He does like Real Lawyer reacts to lawyer scene from movie stuff, and that's like the only stuff I watch from his channel. He does like other stuff that's like related to like real world legal cases. Don't care about that. I'm only here for the scenes from movies from the perspective of a guy who's actually a lawyer. But like, I didn't even bother watching his She-Hulk episode because like, why? What would be the point? They don't do anything that's like worth talking about. Now let me be clear. I would be totally fine with the show just completely dropping the legal stuff altogether and just like completely ignoring it and just focusing on other stuff that they have more interest in doing. Just Jen going on wacky adventures. All of the best episodes, apart from the Daredevil episode, of course, are the ones that have little to nothing to do with lawyer stuff. The pilot that's just about her and Bruce, the Bridesmaids episode, the one where she goes to the like therapy retreat, and the finale have little to nothing to do with legal stuff, and those are the best episodes. The 90s cartoon does next to no lawyer stuff altogether, and it's fun as hell because it's just like wackiness turned up to 11, and it's a good time. And there are plenty of runs from the comics that barely focus on the lawyer aspect at all. John Byrne's run, which is like probably my favorite run of She-Hulk, other than the Charles Soule one, which is entirely lawyer stuff. But the John Byrne run is like barely any lawyer stuff at all. It's more just like Jen going to space, and there's like an issue where like somebody's making a She-Hulk movie and nobody told Jen, so she goes to like, hey, you can't just make a movie about my life without getting permission from me. And like, that's the kind of wacky stuff that happens. It barely ever touches on lawyer stuff, but it's still fun as hell. And the show like clearly doesn't really want to do anything with the lawyer stuff, which would be fine, except that the show has attorney at law in the title. So it's like weird that the show that's like, oh, I'm a lawyer show, and was marketed as, hey, it's going to be a lawyer comedy, and it's going to be different, and we're focusing on the lawyer stuff, and Jen multiple times throughout the show is like, I just want to be a lawyer. It's weird that that show, called Attorney at Law, has zero interest in being about lawyer stuff. I don't really think it's unreasonable to, like, expect lawyer things to happen in a show called Attorney at Law. If the show was just called She-Hulk, then they could focus on the lawyer stuff even less, and it wouldn't be a problem at all. But as it stands, it's got a lawyer, it's got Attorney at Law in the title. So like, what is this? Why is it like this? But if you don't want to make a lawyer show, that's fine. Although on the other hand, why the hell don't you want to make a lawyer show? Have you ever seen any movies and shows with lawyers in them? They're fucking fun as hell. If you don't want to make one, that's fine. But like, I don't understand why you don't want to. Jessica Gao, one of the showrunners, did this interview with Variety where she talks about how initially it seemed like she was really into doing the trial of the Abomination, and it was going to be like this multi-episode arc and stuff like that, and it was apparently part of her original pitch and stuff. But then as they like got more into pre-production and writing the show, they kind of moved away from that idea and seemed to like not be as into it, which is fine. But like, again, this show has Attorney at Law in the title, so it kind of feels weird that you aren't interested in doing a thing about Abomination. That sounds interesting. And maybe that was like a marketing decision and not something made by the core creatives who clearly wanted to like move away from that stuff. But whatever marketing manager person at Marvel was like, we should call it Attorney at Law and make that a big part of the marketing. That's the angle we're going with, even though the show itself like clearly doesn't really want to be about lawyer stuff. Okay, I'm jumping around a little bit here. Stay on track, me. Okay, in the Variety article, like specifically, she says that initially we wanted to make a multi-part trial arc with Abomination, but then we kind of realized we weren't like good at writing that kind of thing. And one thing that we all realized very slowly was none of us are that adept at writing, rousing trial scenes, which is a weird reason to not do it. Like, if you're just not interested in it, that's fine, I guess, but like, I don't really understand why you're not interested in it, because it sounds like a cool idea to me. But let's talk about that episode a little bit specifically, because I have thoughts. It ends up being a 2-part episode, but it feels like there could have been a lot more to it. There's some genuinely interesting ideas brought up in the first episode. I like the setup here a lot. We bring up how Blonsky was working for the U.S. military and assumed he was the good guy when brought in to take down the Hulk. So there's a little more moral ambiguity going on here than at first glance, which is interesting. I like taking ideas from previous Marvel movies and looking at them from a completely different perspective. That's a cool idea. And then the episode ends with the like weird fight scene from Shang-Chi being revealed as sort of a complication to this already complicated trial. Now Jen has to figure out a way to argue against that one time that Abomination was completely let out of prison to fight a guy for seemingly no reason. So far it's a good setup. But then in the second part, the story kind of like devolves into just getting Wong to testify, which she is more than happy to do. So then the tension becomes not like, how is Jen going to win this case, but how is Jen going to be able to get Wong to testify on time, which isn't really a legal drama type of conflict. It's just a ticking clock. We need to have this thing happen before the time limit so we can win, which is like, it's there's nothing like about that that's like very lawyer-y. You know what I mean? Jen brings up a couple points during this sequence, but really she's basically just stalling until Wong can get there and be like, no, that was my bad, guys. Abomination's a good guy, actually, and then that like is enough to win the case, more or less. Plus, we don't get a whole lot of time spent on this because it's like cut between this other case that's very boring and very dumb. It's another 1%er guy who is trying to sue his ex-girlfriend who turned out to be an elf. It's so petty and dumb and has nothing to do with anything. And Jen isn't even related to this case whatsoever. That's the other thing, is like half the cases in this show like don't involve Jen. So it's like, okay, you clearly like don't care about the lawyer stuff and Shield being a lawyer. So why is it here again? So I like the idea of the Abomination trial stuff. I think there is some interesting stuff there. So I went ahead and I wrote a scene, rewriting this sequence. Now this is definitely not perfect. I wrote it in like an hour, and I'm not trying to claim that I'm like a genius writer or anything like that, but I think I'd bring up some points that are a little more interesting than what we got. Anyways, let's take a look at me taking a crack at writing a lawyer scene, even though I have absolutely zero qualifications to do so. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to begin today by talking about a man, an everyday man who would go on to become something extraordinary. A decorated veteran, this man would go on to complete countless missions for his country and save dozens of lives throughout his career. When a new kind of threat emerged, he would put his own life and body on the line to protect the people of the free world from the monsters that threaten it. Entering a top-secret super soldier program, this man endured experimental treatment, willing to do whatever it would take to stand up to the evils of this world. The man, of course, I'm talking about is Captain Emil Blonsky, a war hero who came across the sea to a country he was not born in order to clean up the mistakes our government made in creating the Hulk and protect the people that our own government put in harm's way. Objection. The defense is slandering the name of Dr. Bruce Banner, Miss Walters' own cousin, not to mention an Avenger who has helped save the world on more than one occasion. Your Honor, my relationship to the Hulk is irrelevant to this case, a fact that was made very clear to me. What matters to this case are the facts, such as the fact that over the years, the Hulk has directly or indirectly caused the deaths of 107 people, several of which my client witnessed firsthand, as he will testify. I made up that number. I don't know how many people the Hulk has killed in the MCU, but it feels like at least 100. Like, just from debris, just general debris, and general smashing. It is no wonder that he agreed to put his own life at risk and undergo an experimental treatment in order to attempt to put a stop to that monster. Dr. Banner is not the one on trial, and you want to talk about victims? How about all the innocent lives lost in the Harlem incident? The Hulk may not be on trial today, but his existence led directly to my client's actions. If the U.S. government had not funded Dr. Banner's Gamma Project, the Hulk would not have been created to begin with. If the Hulk had never been created, that same government would never have recruited Captain Blonsky to help clean up the mess that they caused, let alone recommend he be used as a guinea pig in yet another science project. Dr. Banner cannot be blamed for the mistakes of the government, but Captain Blonsky can? The crimes of the Abomination are not my clients alone, and in comparison to the Hulk's victims, my clients are minuscule. Captain Blonsky has been nothing but a model inmate in the last 10 years, while the Hulk has continued to, well, smash without consequence. Dr. Banner's research and... Oh, you want to talk about Dr. Banner's work? Oh, yes. His involvement in the creation of Ultron was extremely vital. I'm sure the citizens of Sokovia have a lot to say on the matter. Should we pay them a visit? Oh, wait. Your Honor, Miss Walters is once again avoiding defending her client by accusing Dr. Banner of crimes he has not been charged nor convicted of. Not to mention the man is an Avenger whose countless heroic actions have more than made up for any mistakes the Hulk may have made in the past, none of which is even relevant, because Dr. Banner is not the one on trial. I'm glad you brought that up, actually. Your Honor, if the Hulk can be considered redeemable based on his actions despite his past mistakes, how then is it fair to hold my client to any higher of a standard? 10 years ago, the Hulk was seen as a monster. Simple as that. If he were ever caught, he would have been tried and convicted with little to no pushback. And that's assuming he would have been tried at all. A luxury, may I remind you, that was not afforded to my client when he received his sentence. In the time since then, the Hulk has certainly done his fair share of heroic deeds, but by my count, he has caused far more destruction than my client has behind bars. Captain Blonsky is not perfect, but served his time sentenced with grace and cooperation. But the purpose of the law is not just to punish those who have done wrong, but to rehabilitate and transform them into productive members of society. If the Hulk can change from a destructive monster to a hero worthy of our respect in the court of public opinion, how is it not fair to give Captain Blonsky the same chance? If we could forgive one Hulk, why not a second? Once again, I want to remind people that I'm not trying to prove that I'm a brilliant, awesome writer and should have been in charge of making the She-Hulk show, and everyone involved in the show is complete hacks and we should yell at them on Twitter. I'm not at all what I'm going for. All I'm saying is, I think this is a little bit more interesting than what we got in the show. And it's even not much of more of a stretch. I really wanted to play off the ideas already set up in that first episode with Blonsky and just kind of really go into it with some, classic big old lawyer scene. And I don't really know anything about the legal system. There's probably a ton of stuff in here that doesn't make any legal sense at all. I barely even know how to write a script. But even though I don't know anything about writing a good lawyer scene, I had so much fun pretending that I did. And I just can't imagine why you wouldn't want to at least try to write something really cool and compelling in a legal setting. Even if you don't know what you're doing, just go for it anyways, because I had a lot of fun doing this, and I don't know what I'm doing. The people involved in She-Hulk have, worked on shows before, so even if they're not, legal experts, who cares? Give it a shot. I bet you'll have a good time and come up with some stuff that's actually a lot more interesting than what we got.
The other strange thing about this series is that we never really get a big lawyer scene of She-Hulk doing an opening monologue or a closing monologue, like walking around the little in-between part between where the like judges and the defendants and everyone else. I don't know what that middle part's called, but you know, it gets lots of love in most lawyer movies, but strangely not in this show. Majority of the cases, Jen is sitting down the whole time, and we barely even get any of the like interviewing and like questioning a witness on a case and like having a lot of back and forth. There's like barely any of that either. There's no jury in any episode, which feels very strange to me. There's like a panel of judges in the Blonsky episode, but still not like a full jury. And maybe a lot of these cases wouldn't necessarily necessitate a full jury, but like, I don't know, that's a fun trope. It's like, these are like really basic lawyer things that you want to see in a courtroom drama that like they don't even bother doing. It's weird. The closest we get is in episode 4 when Jen's working a case for Wong. She does like a little bit of walking around and interviewing a witness on the case, but most of the time she spends standing at this singular podium, which is fine, but it's not as interesting, like even just blocking wise, than when someone's like walking around the room and talking more. And maybe this is a budgetary thing where like I'm guessing it's much easier to do the very expensive She-Hulk effects if she's just like sitting still or standing still for the majority of the scene. Once again, I question why make a show called She-Hulk Attorney at Law if we can't afford to show She-Hulk doing lawyer shit. There is a little bit of this in the Blonsky case where she is like slightly more mobile and she's like actually arguing for her client and like interviewing people and stuff, but she's in this like depowered supervillain prison where she can only appear as Jen. She's not She-Hulk. And again, this sequence is mostly her stalling until Wong shows up. It's like, I don't understand why make it like this. It's like it's frustrating. It's very frustrating. I don't know. The point is, lawyer stuff is cool, and the show is called Attorney at Law, so it's really weird that they like didn't want to go into that stuff more. So one of two things should have happened. One, commit to the lawyer stuff and like go hard on it. Or two, don't commit to it and just focus on other stuff that you're clearly more interested in writing, and don't put Attorney at Law in the title of the show. Sentencing complete. Case dismissed. Thank you so much for watching. Once again, this was originally part of a much larger project. I have a lot more thoughts on the She-Hulk series. So, I don't know, leave a comment if you like this, and maybe I'll talk more about She-Hulk at some point. I do think it's a very interesting series, and I really don't think it's all bad, but there is a lot of elements that I find very frustrating about this show. However, I do find it fascinating. That's it for this video. Thank you for watching, and make sure you subscribe and all that. I'll see you next time with something else. Bye-bye.